Our Highline Voices, 106.5 KQWZ LPFM.
Connecting Highline and our region.
History, cultural heritage, art, performances, contemporary pop culture.
We collect, preserve, and tell the stories of the Highline region and its people.
We want to embrace our differences and similarities.
We want to extend our mission outside the walls of the museum. Our Highline Voices, 106.5 KQWZ LPFM.
Hi everyone, this is Nancy from the Highline Heritage Museum and welcome back. Tonight we have a beautiful soul. I know I'm always saying that everyone is special, but honestly, don't you agree? Everyone is special, everyone has a really unique story and everyone has something to offer. We all have something special and Allison is not the exception, quite the opposite. I'm just so excited. I've been wanting to do this with her for a while actually, just to get to know her a little bit more. I know that we've known each other for a few years now, and we actually can cause trouble together. The good trouble, not the bad one, the good one. And it's always been a joy and pleasure to share the passion and the value and the missions of this cultural sector and history in general. So, Allison, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, and then we'll take it from there. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to say that. Thank you for the opportunity to come with us tonight. Tonight, and just welcome to the space.
Thank you. Well, I've been hearing about this wonderful sort of radio project of yours for a while, so it's delightful to see you in action and get to experience it firsthand. And I always enjoy our chats. So yes, my name is Allison Campbell, and I work for the Washington State Historical Society. I'm actually kind of workshopping new titles. My title has, for the past 5 years, has been Heritage Outreach Manager. And it kind of occurred to us as our department here at the Washington State Historical Society has grown that kind of term heritage outreach was a little squishy and it was unclear what it meant. And we now have more team members doing different things. So our scope has expanded a little bit. So I'm going to share publicly for the first time here that I think I'm settling into a title that includes local history services. And hopefully that's a little bit more descriptive, but essentially what I do for the state of Washington is I provide technical support, training, consultation, cheerleading for our 400 plus small local history museums across Washington. Most of them are run entirely by volunteers, over 60%, and they're taking care of precious collections that mean so much to communities across our state. So I'm just part of the team that tries to kind of help them do that, help them take good care of the stuff and tell engaging and relevant stories and serve their communities. They're doing a great job, but most of these organizations don't have anybody with any professional museum training. So we just kind of, we're that person. I sometimes describe it as sort of a social worker for museums. I don't know all the answers, but I know lots of people who do know the answers. So I see myself as sort of the connector. If you've got a problem and you're a small museum, I'm going to connect you with somebody who can hopefully help you out. So yeah, that's what I do here at the state. That's how I've gotten to know Nancy through our work together with the Washington Museum Association. I'm a huge fan of the Highline Heritage Museum, the work that you all are doing there. And I know a team of incredibly dedicated volunteers helping to support all the programming and the incredible storytelling that's happening at that organization, at your organization.
No, thank you. Now you're part of it. Now we're sharing your story and then you're part of it. No, it has always been intriguing to me, the number of organizations around the state. And you're right, we serve as a Washington Museum Association board, and then we also looking at, the bigger picture, the overall. And I love your job. I truly do. My God, I do. Because you get to connect to other institutions, you get to connect to people that the small institutions that truly need some type of guidance and some type of direction, and like, okay, what is the structure and how do we do this? And there are times that they don't even know where to go. They're just wandering around, and having some type of direction is so needed. And then I think that you do a beautiful job in reaching out, and your personality is also so warm and welcoming that you're not adding the anxiety. I mean, you got these collections that you don't have a lot of the time. You don't have no idea what the collections are about. Where is the paperwork? How is that processed properly or not? And then the funding element, and then the public engagement and all the different areas that what it makes a museum. But to be able to come to the space with you, I think is it's a joy, because you make things so much easier by just welcoming everyone with a smile, like the way you're doing right now. Like this is a beautiful example. You're just smiling, and then it's more like, okay, come on, let's just work it out and we'll figure it out. And then, like you say, connecting the dots into the right people to the right organization. And so I loved your job. I know that I'm sure that you see truly the treasures in Washington State. You get to see those. And I don't know, I wish that I can have like a movie on your brain of like all the different treasures that you've been able to witness.
So much. And Nancy, it's not just the stuff, right? There's incredible artifacts and archives and photo collections across the state that are just incredible. But it's also the people. I mean, I'm a people person, and so I can picture small museums all over Washington that are being so lovingly cared for by people that I've gotten to know and who have become friends. And so that building those relationships is really the most fun part. And I just hope that I can always be sort of a trusted partner. And I don't ever roll in anywhere like I'm an expert, because I'm not. And I have a very specific area of museum training. I don't really know a ton about collections, but I know enough to say, like, look, if you can't afford a huge collections management database system, you can't afford something like that, let's get you set up with an Excel spreadsheet that'll get the job done, but much easier, just kind of meeting people where they're at. Yes, we never want to make folks feel overwhelmed. I joke all the time that thinking about collections in particular, collections work will never be done. There isn't a museum on the planet that will have perfectly inventoried every item all the time and all the metadata is correct and it just won't happen. It's never done. But if you can leave your collection better than you found it, then you did it, right? You met your goal. And so I think that sometimes museum work can get really overwhelming. We recognize that we're trying to take care of these things in perpetuity for generations to come. We hope that these collections and these stories will be preserved forever, and that can get heavy. And just leave it better than you found it. That's what I tell everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I when I have memories of you is some of the different topics that you have addressed in public, like that collections could be one, but the last one, I think it was in the conference, we're talking about education, like the two was like, okay, how we address
yes, you were
the
there for that.
education? Yeah, the education, like in the field, and how do we address that? But before that, it was we did the presentation together on the accessibility, and you were in the legal requirements and all the 88 and all the different elements. As for me, it was more about inclusion and really seeing it from a different angle. But so that's that. And then before that, it just the amazing work that you did through COVID. You were able to unite people in the middle of madness. And so I remember, like, I met you, right? I met you, and then COVID hit right away.
Yep.
And immediately, like, okay, you could have just kind of laid back a little bit and it just like get adjusted, go with the flow as to whatever was happening in front of you. But instead, what you did is that you created a area, a platform where, like, okay, how do we, and in case of the emergencies, how do we come together to address this and this and these topics? And that was an amazing initiative that you took, that you lead to and in a state level and all, you know, gathering all these different museums and like, how do we address these issues? How will you address with this and that? And then seeing it from a state level, but then also being able to customize it specifically to where a topic that we were all able to share or express or cry about. And so it was, when that was the first time that I truly saw you in action through COVID, uniting everyone together. And then from there, my dear, I've just been, you are one of my heroes because you just jump into the horse. You have no idea where the horse was guiding, but you were still like, let's go moving forward. And so, no, I
That's
like
a pretty great description, Nancy. I do feel like I jumped on a horse and I had no idea where it was going. I'd only had my job. Let's see, I had started in May of 2019. And this is a job that I don't think you set out professionally seeking a job like this. Like, I just have a more traditional museum background. I've, been a frontline museum educator, and I've been a curator of education, and I've run public programs and volunteer. So this, like, we call it in the museum business field services, right? This kind of support role, I just kind of landed in it because it sounded fun, right? And I thought, okay, well, I really like working with people. And then the pandemic hit, and I hadn't even really figured out what my job was quite yet, which I think was a good thing. It kind of allowed me, there was a little bit of a like, no holds barred. Let's just, we know people are suffering personally right now while they're trying to juggle responsibilities for their organizations and their museums. And so it really did start. And I remember you were on the first one. It started with just like, okay, let's just invite some museum folks to a Zoom and just check in with each other. And then I think out of that came that sort of common concerns virtual series that we did. We're like, okay, well, we're kind of moving into a new phase of this, and we're not opening anytime soon. And we need to do a virtual tour of our museum, and we have no idea how to do that, right? So I found somebody who had tried doing that and figured it out, and we were just learning from each other. And I really do feel that way. Like, I always learn so much from you when we're in conversation, and from all of my colleagues across the state. And so I really think of this work as learning and sharing together. Like, I don't like presenting anyone as an expert. This is the one way to do the thing. No, like, we've all, even our friends at our tiniest museums in our most rural corners of Washington, have figured out really clever ways to solve problems, and we can all learn from that. So let's just get everybody together and talk. And so I agree that pandemic period, there was lots of stuff happening in the background, trying to get museums reopened. I don't know if you'll recall that museums were lumped together with like bowling alleys in terms of priority for reopening, which I love to bowl. So no shade on bowling, but like, we saw ourselves as more essential, of course. And so the governor's like handing down all of these, guidelines for reopening, and then trying to push that out. There was a lot happening behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But I agree that it just felt good to like, bring folks together. I think that there was sort of I hope that people felt strengthened by recognizing that that other folks at other museums were like trying to navigate the same, disaster of a situation, and figure out how to get their organizations on steady footing and come through it. So yeah, it really did. There's not much that I look back fondly on about the pandemic. It was a really difficult time. And I know so many small museums are still reeling from the impacts. I mean, we all are. And I think we're going to be reeling with some budget impacts here pretty soon that are kind of remnants of the pandemic. A lot of small museums lost a lot of their volunteers and haven't been able to reopen they're still not open the same number of days and hours that they had been prior to the pandemic. And that's a really big concern for me. But I do feel like we were able to build a community of statewide museum folks through that experience. And hopefully we've managed to hang on to it as life has gotten crazy and busy and chaotic again, as things kind of ramp up to full steam. But yeah, what a time, right? Oh my gosh.
Wow, that was intense. It was crazy, but also very humbling because it really strips down everything, makes you very vulnerable. And then somehow within that vulnerability, you're able to come together as a team or as a field or as a colleague and as a network. Like, okay, we share the same issues. Like that initiative, like you said, there was a lot of things that happened behind the scenes for us to even be open as a museum and not be and ask the question, are we truly essential? I mean, that was like the biggest question when all those issues were happening. Like, how essential are our museums? How essential is our history? And to me, you can cover food, you can cover the house, you can cover blankets, you can cover education, but then what about us as a human beings, meaning our souls, our minds, our hearts, our history, our heritage, or what makes us us? And so you can, do that physical coverage of basic needs, but then there is this huge part of us that we take it for granted. And because we take it for granted, when it comes to, our heritage more important or less important than getting food or getting housing? And in my case, I do believe that it's even more important than housing. Why? Because it provides you a sense of identity. It provides you a sense of community. It provides you like who I am and where I am. And from that foundation, that's how you're able to be as a human being out there in the planet. You can do all the jobs, you can go to school, but if you're missing that component on who you are and what makes you, then that's when I think the issues really starts. And so I saw a lot of that with the kids.
Mm.
Yeah, all the necessities were covered, but then the lack of community, the lack of sharing, the lack of all the different issues. I do talk a lot, that I want to make sure I'm not over talking. So I want to make sure that it's
No,
more about
please
you
keep
and
talking. No, 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 no. No, because you have raised, I think, some well, I think a lot about connection and feeling connected. There's the identity piece, like who am I and where do I fit in this world? And then how am I connected to the people around me? And, that's where I just think museums play such a vital role, and can be so important to making people feel like they belong in a place and in a community. You do that beautifully at Highline Heritage Museum. I know it's made your organization and your institution just really the center of a lot of conversations about what it means to be in community. And you've been very intentional about that, about reaching out to folks who haven't historically been welcomed into a museum space. And it's, I think, a real model for how all of our museums can become those kind of community centers, places where people gather to touch base with each other and to learn about how they're connected to the past, to the present, to the place. So I think you're right. I think when we lost that for that period of time, I think for a lot of folks in this business and in the museum field, it allowed us to really kind of hone our thinking around the role that museums play. And so, I'm kind of Pollyanna-ish. I'm always like the sunny side, or like, where's the rainbow after the storm? And I do think that the struggle of the pandemic did provide opportunity too, and I think that's one of them, just as you described, to really understand our place in community more clearly.
I
Yeah.
was watching this show a few days ago from the Easter Island, how they lost the sense of how they had these written materials, but they don't know how to read them properly because of it was people came, took them for slavery purposes, and then the population really diminished, and so they lost that part. And that's so basic as once again as a culture, as what makes us us. And so that make me the connection of the importance of who we are America 250 is coming up. And so there's another element of, okay, history. One thing is as an individual, as a community, but then we're going to be here as a country, what that means. And I know that you guys are leading this component, but you're the one driving the car in this interview, so I'm not going to distracting you in other things. Like I want you to let us know what else are you doing, and then and even if you just want to continue to talk about the landscape in Washington as a whole, is absolutely okay.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to touch base about America 250. I have our department. So for a couple of years, I was just a department of one, and now there are 5 of us, which is like amazing, and speaks to the investment that the state is making in this work of kind of reaching across Washington. So yes, America 250 is something folks maybe are just starting to hear about, but I imagine you'll hear more about, also known as the semi-quincentennial. Rolls off the tongue there. But we just call it 250 really around here. And this will be a national commemoration of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And of course, it's a really kind of interesting kind of thing to navigate here on the West Coast in Washington, not like our colleagues in Connecticut and New York, who, they're colonies, right? They've got actual places and structures and individuals that they can kind of organize programming around. And it's going to be much more grounded in that actual story of the American Revolution. Here in Washington, we're not very connected to that story directly. And so we've been working closely with a state commission that's chaired by the Lieutenant Governor, Denny Heck, and representatives from all of the commissions, and with our tribal partners, and trying to think about sort of what a commemoration here in Washington looks like. And those plans are just coming together. There's a new website, America250wa.org. I'm fairly confident that's right. And that's going to be a landing page where you can kind of see, but communities across the state will be planning their own events and programming. Really, as a state agency, and certainly our department is really focused on how can we help our 400 plus local history museums engage with this moment, this once in a generation opportunity to get folks thinking about history, and putting a spotlight on history. So we have some ideas about how to hopefully encourage visitation at our local history museums. Maybe you haven't been to your museum since a field trip in the 4th grade, but maybe it's time to get back and check in with them and see what's going on. So we have some ideas about some kind of statewide ways to participate if you're an organization, and we'll be sharing a lot more about that. And also, we just are really focused on making sure that our local history museums are around in 50 years when we celebrate the tricentennial, and that they're strong, thriving organizations. I know it's crazy to think about, but a lot of these museums, a large number of museums were founded around the bicentennial in 1976 because there was all this excitement about history, this interest in preservation. And a lot of those museums that are now almost 50 years old are struggling. They're struggling with funding. They can't find enough volunteers, all the reasons that we've sort of discussed coming out of the pandemic. And so we have proposed some grant programs that we hope will just help strengthen and build capacity amongst all of our history organizations. So that's been kind of our big focus and our big ask. Yes, 250, there's lots of interesting things to dig into and talk about around that historical moment. But let's think about history in general and what it means to us, and the work that goes into doing history, and how can we better support the individuals and the organizations that are out there doing the history work. So that's kind of our focus. I'm excited about it. And it has felt so far away, but it is now right around the corner. So
I know it's really close. And no, I want to tap it into the actual structure from a state. It was more like an invitation to all of us to reflect on the local history and the connections that we have with the museum. So that my angle was more that in that way.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing this other side of it. Just connecting in what it means to be American and what it means to celebrate this, regardless of the historic context that we have in different states and in country. Are you American, and what does that mean to you to celebrate something like this? And then how do you connect that with your local history museums, and how do you connect that with the opportunities that you'll have in your communities, in the schools, and civic events that the own cities will be creating, and so on. And so now this is an opportunity to reflect about history, to reflect about what's coming up, and to reflect about it's just how, even though we will be celebrating this today, we are, for me, a blending of the past, the present, and the future. And to me, it's all the same thing, because it's just either we coming from something, we moving, and then we hear into something. So there's this fluidity narrative of a community history that it doesn't stop because it just happened, 50 years ago, 250 years ago, or even before that.
Right.
So we got 5 minutes. I believe it or not.
5 minutes.
I told you it was gonna go. I told you it was just gonna go like this. I want to be respectful of your time. I know that we would talk about that. And so instead of making it a little longer, we're just going to do it. We got 5 minutes. Anything exciting that you want to share? Anything all the way from maybe a cool project that you see around the state? One question, and I should kind of warn you about that question. No, here, but like it's always been in my head. Well, seriously, I'm always confused with this. And I've known you for who knows how many years, and I've been in this field for who knows how many years too. What's the difference between the Washington State Historical Society, and the Washington State Museum?
Yeah, great question. I'm sure you're not the only one out there who has spent years, pondering this. Yeah. So our organization is the Washington State Historical Society. We operate the Washington State History Museum. So it's basically like a department under the Historical Society. And the museum is here in Tacoma. And there's a long, fascinating story about why we're not in Olympia or Seattle, but we're in Tacoma. And so, the majority of my colleagues here in Tacoma work on things happening in the museum, huge exhibits team, huge collections team. But then our department is sort of the one that is doing sort of the statewide work, right? And it's part of our kind of mandate in our RCW that we will support small organizations across the state. And we do that through grants. We have 2 big grant programs that our department operates, a diversity and local history grant that funds paid internships, which the Highline Heritage Museum has received for this radio station, I think, or for other projects. Yep. And then the Heritage Capital Projects grant, which I think you all also received back in the day. Did you? Yeah. So to help build the new museum. And then we have a couple of big statewide initiatives that I'd love to mention. We received a grant from the federal government to do some work examining and engaging in a process to address monuments that were placed by the Historical Society between about 1908 and 1950. There are 42 of them that we know of, and that sounds crazy that we don't know about them all, but sometimes history organizations aren't great at keeping track of their own history. But these were monuments placed by the Historical Society all over the state, mostly documenting interactions between American settlers and our tribes, particularly in the years around the treaties and when the treaties were signed in the 1850s. So these are complicated histories. They kind of commemorate a lot of violence, but in a very one-sided way, right? They don't tell the whole story, and they certainly don't address the impacts that these events had on the tribes, or why these events were, what preceded these events. They're just very incomplete in the histories that they tell. And the tribes were not involved in the original kind of discussion about where to put these and what to memorialize. So we are in the midst of a years long, really exciting process to consult with the tribes of Washington on a government to government, because we represent the state at government to government level, and then to also host kind of community conversations about monuments in general. These ones specifically, are monuments a good way of telling public history? How do they make us feel? How do they function? So those public meetings are happening now. We have 2 next week. One on Monday in in Lewis County, and then one down at the Clark County Historical Society on Tuesday. But they will be happening across the state. So I would love for your listeners to kind of make sure you're following our social media pages. That's probably the best way to know about those. But we've hosted one so far in Spokane, and it was really rich and interesting and productive, I think. So that's an exciting project. And then the last thing I want to mention, because this was a project of it is a partnership. It's actually a project of the Washington Museum Association, but we got another grant from the federal government, to pilot what we're calling the Volunteer Museum Learning Community. It's a terrible name. I couldn't come up with anything better. The acronym stinks. VMLC. I don't know. Anyway, but it's a cohort-based kind of model where we will bring together 8 museums, and we've already announced who they are, and they're all over the state. It's really exciting, that are all volunteer run. They have no paid staff. And bring them together to kind of build up their basic museum core competencies, everything from fundraising and volunteer recruitment and governance, and collections care and tribal consultation. Just have open conversations, learn and share together, connect them with some folks in the field who have experience doing this work. So Nancy, I've already got a couple topics I'm going to be reaching out to you about, to come and just have this very kind of informal conversation about how do we connect to community, right? And so we're really excited. We have funding for sort of 1 year. We're going to provide these organizations with data loggers so that they can track the humidity and temperature in their collection storage spaces, just so they know if they're taking good care of their collections. We're going to give them flatbed scanners so they can work on digitizing photographs. We're going to bring them all. We're going to cover their expenses to come to the Washington Museum Association conference in June. So it's very exciting. We're literally just kicking it off. And so we'll have to check in with each other a year from now and see how it went. But we're thrilled to be working and supporting the Washington Museum Association in that project.
Wow, this is amazing. And we are part of the group, so it's great to always be informed, but it's beautiful to be able to share that out there too. It's like, okay, that's what's happening. This is what's going on, and all the initiatives. I think that either you guys representing the state or the Washington Museum Association, or us as individual organizations trying to do the work, I think all of it comes down to the same foundation of caring about our communities, and caring about how do we save, the history, how do we preserve all those different elements that makes us as a community. And it is a very beautiful opportunity that we all have. Very humbling to, even like, here I am, I'm an immigrant. I was not born and raised here. And people have claimed to me, how dare you being here? Well, whatever. But at the end of the day, it comes down to really caring for the community. It really comes down to how can we improve things? How can we move forward? And I'm just so, so thankful that you came in with us today to share a little bit about all this work from a different view, and more overview on the state level, and see that you care, the organization cares, the people around us care. Sometimes we do have factors that prevent us from doing things more fluidly, but the intention is there, the caring is there, the focus is there, and the effort, because it takes work, the effort is there, and to continue to move forward. So it's just, I just love you guys and love you, and it just makes me so happy that there are initiatives to help each other, like the one that you're sharing about, the different institutions. But then also the other one that you mentioned, the recognition of, with our Native American communities and the pain that they still feel November is going to be the Native American Heritage Month, and so this is like a right timing to start having all these conversations. And not only because it's a month, because we should be doing it regardless of the month and regardless of the day, but it's another hey, don't lose track of this. And just so happy to be in with the middle of this group of people that are just riding the horse, working it, and just driving it. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you, Nancy, and you are just a cherished partner in all of this work. So very grateful for you and for your organization.
Thank you. Well, our time is up. They went like this.
That did go by fast, like you promised.
Yeah. And so once again, what is your website just so people can reach out to you?
Yep. So you can find us at washingtonhistory.org, and the tab across Washington will list all of the initiatives of our department, the Heritage Outreach Department, and you'll find America 250 there, our grants there, the Monuments Project there. So washingtonhistory.org, and then just head to Across Washington.
Everyone, if you have any questions, please get back to them. And they are a very cool organization. And so, Allison, I get to see you often, but I'm glad that people got a little glimpse of you here in Highline. And so, thank you everyone for joining us. Allison, appreciate it. A warm hug, and bye everyone.
Our Highline Voices, 106.5 KQWZ LP FM. We envision ourselves sitting at a round table where no one is the leader and stories are heard respectfully, regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, disabilities, or ethnicity. Our mission is we collect, preserve, and tell the stories of the Highline region and its people. We want to extend our mission outside the walls of the museum. Our Highline Voices represents us all, honoring our past, celebrating our present, and uniting to cultivate our future. This project allows us to reach out to demographics who might be unable to visit the museum. People with disabilities, low-income families, people who don't trust museums, and more. In partnership, we are launching a locally programmed new radio station at the museum, featuring recorded and live Highline's heritage, history, culture, arts, and more. Are you interested in sharing your story? Email director@highlinemuseum.org.